Hi, everybody. This is Dan Stolbarger. It's the week of September 28th, and this is our KFIR Middle East update. We'll be leaving for Israel tomorrow, and so I'm going to be recording the next 3 consecutive weeks from Israel, so I hope you stay tuned and check them out. They are all posted on YouTube. And as you know, right now I'm going to send you to our website at Holy Ground Explorations, because each one of these YouTubes has an accompanying PDF PowerPoint presentation, because I'm not always able to get to all the materials, and there's oftentimes photos that really embellish the message or the stories that you're about ready to hear about. Again, all of these are... Our Middle East update comes from Israeli sources. I want to make sure you're aware of that. HolyGroundExplorations.com. That's the home of KFIR, not only our reading schedule, our discipleship group, but also it gives you all of the brochures for our Israel tours. We're heading out tomorrow and we'll be gone for just about a month. It's our first tour to Israel under Holy Ground. Super excited. And we'll be journeying through Israel, as well as going south all the way down to Eilat, crossing the border over to Petra. And so keep us in your prayers. But with that being said, although you can't go on this tour, we do have an amazing lineup for next year. So check that out. But specifically, I want to know if anybody's interested in our School of Discipleship. This, we only take 12 people. We rent vans. It's unlike any other tour. We call it our Selah School of Discipleship. As I mentioned, it's 3 weeks long. And if this is of interest to anyone out there, please go to our website, check out the brochure, and get signed up right away, because for the last 2 years, this particular tour has sold out. Well, let's look at the week's headlines that's transpired. The Times of Israel, in regards to what's going on with the UN right now, there's some thought that Abbas was going to sort of give some sort of a major announcement, a major blast, I guess you would say. Apparently what he's going to say to the General Council is that he is going to give Israel a deadline not specified, but it's a deadline for meeting its obligations. You know, we've been talking about the Iranian deal, we've been talking about the battle for Jerusalem, we've been talking about the upcoming 2-state scenario. Now we've got Russia involved in Syria. So all of this together, we really want to understand the times in which we're living. So Abbas is basically saying, if Israel doesn't follow through on its commitments to its 2-state solution, then it's unspecified at this time, but you have to understand what this means. He is going to announce the Oslo Accords to being null and void. Now, if you've been to Israel, you realize that there's 3 different sections. There's A, B, and C in the West Bank. In that B and C area, you still have the Israeli army overseeing for civil authorities and protection, etc. A is all Palestinian. If you remove those things, you're just going to have violence. That's what he's threatening. It will be an intifada of, I guess it'll be the 3rd one. So that's what's being tossed out at this time. As I mentioned already, too much material to cover in detail to kind of keep it within this 15-minute time frame. I'll let you read about Lindsey Graham's comments about this Iranian self-inspection that he calls really a dangerous joke. I'm not sure you're aware of this, but the New York City Public Schools, for the very first time on Thursday, observed a day off for a Muslim holiday. Eid al-Adha is what it's called. It's the first time that the schools that are serving a 1.1 million population of students was closed for a Muslim holiday. Interesting times in which we live. You can read about the Palestinian Media Watch's report about Nablus and a potential sister city in Norway. I'm not sure you're aware of this, but over the last month there's been 4 rockets that have been intentionally fired into Syria, into Israel. We just had one yesterday that hit on the Israeli side of the Golan Heights. There was no damage or injuries, but I'm just bringing it up because there's a report out that Russia's involvement in Syria, you're going to have to connect all these dots here, but the bottom line for these headlines is that Hezbollah has just been on the receiving end of 75 new Soviet-era tanks. And make no mistake about it, a lot of the problems up north, whether it's Syria and the Quneitra area or whether it's the Lebanese border side, that is a kettle that's boiling over between Israel and Hezbollah. Well, let's talk a little bit about a meeting that's supposed to take place today between Obama and Putin. You see, Moscow has decided to enter into the Syrian fray, and the big question is why and to what end. Putin obviously has smelled American weakness in this area, and he's only too happy to get involved. The question is really, what's his end game? Is he going to want to replace ISIS with sort of a little Russia in the area, or is he sensing that Assad's support is dwindling so much that it's time for sort of the big brother to come in to protect Assad's backside? You have to understand the history of what's transpired over the last year and a half. The United States, you remember back when there was threats of chemical warfare and Assad was given a red line if he did this or didn't do that or whatever, and of course we never uphold our red lines. But the bottom line is that Assad's still in power, and there's been this ominous nuclear deal with Iran that's been signed, sealed, and delivered. And so there's a new kind of atmosphere that's going on in the Middle East under really formerly American auspices. There's really no more good guys or bad guys. Everybody just seems to be partners together. And the new reality is simply this: Assad has survived. He's renewed his license to rule, and soon we'll see that this renewed license to rule will allow him to have a license to kill. This, my friends, is really one of Israel's biggest fears, and it's really materializing right before our very eyes. You see, Washington is now reaching out to Russia, which is openly helping Assad. Now you're going to have to connect these dots. We're reaching out to Russia, who's openly helping Assad in Syria, who's working in conjunction with Iran, which in turn supports Hezbollah. And, you know, with this refugee crisis, we know the Chancellor of Germany, who just a year or two ago compared Hitler to being the same as Assad, or Assad being the same as Hitler, she's now wanting a meeting to reach out and partner with Assad. And so all these factors are turning into Israel's biggest fear. And where is the United States in the midst of all this? Like I said, there's no longer good guys or bad guys. They're just partners. But really, to what end? The bottom line is that Syria has survived Assad is giving a new lease of power. Nasrallah of Hezbollah is beaming on television with proclaiming victory, seeing Russia involved in Syria, and these tanks and the support that he's going to receive from the nuclear deal of $150 billion given to Iran will only go to strengthen Hezbollah, and it's just a matter of time before we have that next conflict between Hezbollah and Israel. So these are the fears that are materializing. The one thing we need to remember is that God is in control and that God holds Israel in the palm of his hands. But as believers, we're told that we must be warriors of prayer, praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Let's make sure that we're doing that in these days. There's an article here that's called Anyone Listening? You can read it for yourself, but once again, I feel obligated every time I come across these to present them with the question, is anybody listening? Because here we have a military parade in Iran. We have one of the leading officials, leading generals in Iran, basically saying, you know what, we hope Israel does something because we want to wipe them out, and we're going to do it before the 25 years is up. And so again, not only the threat to wipe Israel off the face of the map, but to attack the United States as well. Well, new subject, just as depressing, unfortunately, but this new subject, let me tell you something about the Temple Mount, okay? Whenever there's calm, or put it this way, whenever there's a value to have turmoil and terrorism and tension, all one has to do is to, and there doesn't have to be a grain of truth in this, but to accuse Israel of messing one way or another with the Temple Mount. And that will cause rock throwing, rioting in the streets, knifing, you name it. That's what's behind a lot of this tension. And so here we go again. You can see the cartoon on the PDF that Israel is being accused of meddling or doing something, wanting to destroy the al-Aqsa Mosque or the Mosque of the Golden Dome or whatever. And this just sends Muslims into a feeding frenzy, and that's what's happening today. In spite of all that, what's interesting is that last week there was a discovery of a seal that testifies. It was found at the dump where, there's these sites that when the Temple Mount was being dug up for the purposes of al-Aqsa expanding and that sort of thing, a lot of the dirt was just put off and dumped in certain areas. Israelis would say, we're not allowed to dig or whatsoever. Who knows what's in that? So they have found these sites where these dumpings occur, and they've been sifting through all of this. So remember, all of what they've been sifting through has been taken from the Temple Mount. And again, one of the lies that's being spread is that Israel never had a temple, they weren't on the Temple Mount, and all of that sort of balderdash. What just happened is that a 10-year-old Russian student just found a rare seal in one of these areas that date back to the time of David. So interesting with the timing of the rioting and all that on the Temple Mount and the accusations against Israel for this seal to be found. I'll let you read that for yourself. The last really important article is about the EU, and it's about the BDS plan, the boycott, divestment, sanction plan. The EU will start labeling Israeli products manufactured in Judea and Samaria as well as in the Golan Heights next month in October. And by labeling the products, the EU is singling them out for boycotts, an attempt to generate pressure on Israel to do what? To accept a diplomatic process that will endanger its security, but again, related to this two-state debacle. what they call a two-state solution. And so this is called the BDS plan, and it is gaining some traction. So pay attention to that. And then just the insensitivity, the ignorance. A local Chicago news station used a graphic of a yellow badge like those Nazi, the ones the Nazis forced upon the Jews to wear during the Holocaust, to illustrate its report on the start of Yom Kippur. You can see this picture. I mean, it's just insane that they could put this picture up, which is the badge that they had to wear with, in the background, you actually see the striped pajamas that they had to wear as well. And this was like a news station saying, oh, in Israel, they're celebrating Yom Kippur. And that's the graphic that they use. Well, they apologized for the error. They said that it was they needed a major correction. But again, to me, this just talks about the insensitivity and really the rise of anti-Semitism, because it's continuing to grow. Well, that's our report for this week. Again, in the PDF, you'll find a short teaching on the Feast of Tabernacles that I took from Rabbi Ari Inkin, who is a rabbinical director with an organization called United with Israel. It's just going to give you some background about the Feast of Tabernacles. It's very much a joyful occasion, remembering how God provides and how God protects. Fitting that with the blood moons just passing and the turmoil that's ramping up, that we're in the midst of a feast that reminds the Israeli people of how God protects and how God leads. May that be so. I wish you all shalom, and ask that you would be remembering us over the next month in your prayers. God bless you.